could not admit. Yet the data pulsed on the screen, real, present, now. Then explain this. The scholar zoomed outward, showing where the signal originated. The void of Harkos, a dead system scoured bare ages ago. No colonies, no trade, no life. And yet, the pulse emerged from there, steady, patient. It felt less like a cry and more like a warning. The chamber wavered between disbelief and dread. Some wanted to mobilize fleets at once. Others demanded silence, terrified of resurrecting an old legend that might prove more real than their empire's pride could bear. But the young officer spoke again, voice trembling. If the myths were true, then humanity was never gone. They were waiting. When silence turned heavy, the Valen dispatched 3 warships to investigate. Powerful vessels, each armed with plasma lances and shield arrays tested in a dozen wars. Crews boasted loudly, mocking the mission as a hunt for ghosts. They never returned. First, their signals distorted, fragmented into bursts of static. Then came a single message, cut short by static. They are, before silence consumed the channel. The council reeled. The arrogance began to crack. Rumors bled into the streets of capital worlds. Whispers of Terran fleets roaming the void, of humans returned with vengeance carved into their hulls. On frontier stations, silence became an infection. Civilian chatter dwindled. Merchants refused to travel near the Harkos rim. Priests recited old warnings. When non-existent vessels arrive, the stars will tremble. And then they saw it. A single transmission bled across every comms array in the sector. A visual, raw and undeniable. At first it looked like darkness itself, a shadow blotting out the starfield. Then shapes emerged. Colossal, angular, hulls blacker than space, etched with scars and glowing with the faint burn of engines older than empires. Not 1, not 3, an entire formation. They slid forward in silence, ships that should not exist, ships every archive swore were only myths. Non-existent vessels here. The comms channels fell silent. No laughter, no disbelief. Only a heavy, crushing silence that spread like gravity itself, forcing every voice down into stunned awe. The return of the forgotten. Every fleet admiral, every ambassador, every scholar who had ever mocked the name of humanity now stared at the unthinkable. The vessels did not broadcast ident codes, did not request permission, did not explain. They simply moved, their presence rewriting everything. One ship alone was larger than a city, its profile jagged like a predator built from nightmares. Smaller escorts darted around it, shapes reminiscent of the ancient Terran navy recorded only in legend. And then came the final detail, the one that broke the last of the council's denial. On the hull of the lead vessel, marked in white against endless black, were words scrawled in the ancient script of Earth. UNS Resolute. The chamber gasped. Entire galaxies seemed to inhale at once. A legend had spoken its name aloud. The myths had arrived. The silence deepened. No counselor dared move. No admiral dared order fire. For every being who gazed upon those ships felt the same truth claw its way into their bones. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was not a story. They were here. And they had returned on vessels that should never have existed. When silence was still a joke, they laughed. They always laughed when the subject was raised, humans. In the marble chambers of the Karen Senate, the idea of Terrans was more of a jest than a topic of debate. These were not names etched in the registries of living civilizations. These were not empires of fleets or colonies spread across the spiral arms. No, The humans belong to bedtime stories told to wide-eyed hatchlings, or the occasional academic trying to make their name by chasing old myths. The Karen laughed loudest of all. Their chancellor once smirked on the Senate floor, leaning against the railing of his podium, and said to the gathered audience, "If humans ever existed, then where are their banners? Where is their fleet? Where are the monuments they should have left behind? A species that supposedly touched every corner of the void, yet no trace remains. It is not a history, it is a ghost story." And the chamber had roared with amusement. The Creole scholars, Serpentine and Severe, had used humans as cautionary tales, records of what happens when ambition outgrows survival. They dismissed them as fabricated ancestors, legends that newer races invented to justify their own struggles. The Rock and War academies had weaponized the myth in another way, teaching their young strategists, never become like the humans, so blinded by pride that they vanish into extinction. To all, the story of humanity was useful. To none, it was real. And so it became habit. When explorers reported faint echoes in deep space that did not match known transponder codes, colleagues laughed and said, "Perhaps the Terrans are coming back." When the patrol fleets found derelicts with strangely human-like designs, senators chuckled. The myths are recycling themselves again. When war councils wanted to emphasize an impossible scenario, they called it a human gambit. The word had slipped from awe into parody, from reverence into ridicule. And that is why, when the first anomaly appeared, no one was alarmed. The first echo. The report arrived as a mere whisper, a single line carried across encrypted channels to the central relay of the Dominion of Worlds. It spoke of an object, or perhaps several. The distinction was unclear. The deep space monitors stationed near the Perseid fringe had recorded a movement, not of one vessel, but of thousands. Not with transponder codes, not with signals, but with shadows. Their sensors showed gaps in the starlight, patches of void blotting out the background, as though entire constellations had gone dark for a heartbeat. The patrol commander laughed when he received it. "Non-existent vessels," he muttered, passing the report along to the Council's intelligence division. "We'll file it under ghost readings. Tell the astronomers they're seeing phantoms again." The phrase stuck. Within hours, officers across the sector were mocking it. Non-existent vessels. That was what the scanners had found. That was what the myth had delivered. Nothing. Some suggested it was a sensor malfunction, the sort caused by solar storms or gravitic eddies. Others claimed rival empires were running covert cloaking tests. A few amused analysts whispered it was the Terrans. Always the Terrans. Always the punchline. The Dominion's archivists, however, dug deeper. They pulled the data from the relay and compared it with records centuries old, scouring the forgotten vaults where outlawed histories gathered dust. And there, in the brittle inscriptions of a long-banned manuscript, they found a phrase. "They will come as shadows first, blotting out the stars before the sound of their names can be spoken." It was a prophecy, written in the age when the Council had still feared the humans. And though the archivists trembled as they read it, their warnings went unheard. The Senate had already laughed, and once the Senate laughed, the galaxy followed. The second signal. 3 cycles later, the ghost readings grew bolder. This time, they were recorded not on the fringe but deep within regulated space. Merchant convoys traveling along the trade artery between Calvoran and Helix Prime reported a disturbance. Entire blocks of stars winked out behind them, as though curtains of darkness were being drawn across the void. Yet nothing appeared on scanners, nothing transmitted on comms. One convoy captain, a veteran of 100 campaigns, dared to swear before the Trade Council that he had seen vessels, vast, unlit hulls gliding in silence, darker than space itself. They did not move as ships do, he told the council, voice hoarse. They moved as if the void itself carried them. There were no engines, no flames, no signatures, only mass, only presence. The council expelled him within the hour, accusing him of fear-mongering. His merchant license was revoked. His name was scrubbed from the registry. Non-existent vessels, the senators scoffed again, letting the phrase echo across their halls like a protective charm. The words had become a shield, a way to dismiss what gnawed at the edge of their minds. But the captains whispered differently in their mess halls, and the patrol fleets began doubling their escorts. And the Creel academies suddenly reintroduced the human case studies they had long mocked. Still, no one admitted belief. To speak of Terrans as real was to invite ridicule. Better to mock, better to scoff, better to pretend the shadows were nothing at all. The growing dread. It was on Vera Prime, a jewel world of the Dominion, that the laughter first began to crack. The planet was known for its skis, vast, open expanses unmarred by pollution, where every night billions of stars shone clear as crystal. Pilgrims traveled light years to witness it. Lovers made vows beneath it. Children grew up learning constellations by heart. But on one night, recorded forever in planetary history, the stars went out. Not all, not even most, but a swath of the heavens, stretching across the northern horizon, simply vanished. Entire constellations winked into darkness as if a curtain had been drawn across them. And the people saw it, not through scanners, not through filtered sensors, but with their own naked eyes. Crowds gathered in the streets, pointing upward in horror. Pilgrims screamed. The temples rang their bells. Across the planet, billions whispered the same thing at once. Non-existent vessels. The Dominion deployed its fleets at once, filling the skies with cruisers and dreadnoughts, hurling probes into the black. But nothing returned. The stars eventually reappeared, as suddenly as they had vanished, and the void looked once again like void. But the silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear. For the first time, no one laughed.